Okay, I'm as excited as I could be because this is one of the most interesting aspects of being at the PMOPA convention is the interesting people that you have here. And one of the people that I've met is Bruce Landsberg. It's so cool to have you at the PMOPA convention. Thank you for coming.
Well, Joe, you're way too kind. I'm delighted to be here. I have spoken to back then. I think it was MMOPA years ago, and what you do here is critical. These type clubs are just essential for helping to keep people flying high-end aircraft safer, helping them to get better knowledge of how their machines really perform, to get the full performance out of the aircraft and the full performance out of themselves.
Right, exactly. I agree completely. To me, when we're dealing with type-specific aircraft, and it's learning those nuances about the aircraft, and one of the best places to come is at the convention, where this ought to be the clearinghouse. It ought to be the place where if you're interested in a PA-46, here's the place to be, and because you're going to meet the best, you're going to have the vendors that support it the best, and you're just going to meet the most interesting people, which here you are.
Well, you flatter me, sir, and I'd like to argue with you, but you're not giving me the opportunity, at least not yet. The podcast is early.
Hey, let's go back into your history. When did you first learn to fly? I mean, if I read your resume, it is incredible. Tell me about your first foray into aviation.
Well, I was in Air Force ROTC and went to summer camp. I was just finishing my junior year at the University of Maryland, and when I got through being abused at boot camp, my dad said, well, you know, it's too late for you to get a summer job, and I don't want you hanging around the house all the time, so why don't you learn to fly? And I said, well, I hadn't really considered it. I'd been in light airplanes before, but hadn't really thought about it. And he said, well, give it a shot. Well, College Park Airport, which is the world's oldest continuously operating airport with some of the oldest airplanes, was out there. So I went out to the flight school there, and they had Piper J3 clubs. And so I started on that, and you're not going to believe this, guaranteed private pilot certificate for $550.
Really? Guaranteed?
Really. So you did the first 25 hours in the Piper Cub, and then you went to the big airplane, the Cessna 150, and you finished up your last 10 hours because it was an approved school, and that was that. So I went from zero to private pilot in 6 weeks.
Wow.
It came easily for me. I flew pretty much every day and sometimes twice a day, and I studied ground school in books. Back when we had books.
Right.
We're still into books.
I still like books, yeah.
Yeah. So
I still like your book.
Yeah,
We're going to talk about that.
Yeah, so do I. But anyway, that lit the fuse. So then I went back to Dad and I said, well, do you think I could get a commercial rating? He said, as long as you stay in college, yeah. So I did, and I was committed to the Air Force at that time and wanted to fly for them. And they said, well, son, because you have a pilot certificate already and shown some aptitude for it, we're going to put you in missiles because you have allergies, so you can't fly for us.
Oh, you're kidding.
Drought. So I got trained in nuclear weapons, Minuteman III, which is an incredible system, and we don't need to go down that rabbit hole right now. It looks good on a resume. I was glad to have the opportunity. Our job was if somebody started something, we were to finish it. Of course, the planet wouldn't be much good afterwards.
Right.
But
does this mean you had a job with the Air Force or with the military deep underground in the
North in the wilds of North Dakota? That's exactly right.
I've heard of people that have done this, and what a job, what a life.
The psychology is interesting, and there are lots and lots of stories which we could spend a long time on, but we'll not do that here. So anyway, I decided I was more interested in aviation, so after I got off active duty, I used my GI Bill and started training, and the next thing I got was my flight instructor certificate. And at 243 hours total flight time, I became a flight instructor.
Wow.
And learned more from my first students than I ever taught them.
Yeah. It's a license to learn.
And there were some old guy flight instructors there at our approved school, and I would get my head handed to me at every phase check. Bruce, you didn't do this, you didn't cover that, et cetera, et cetera. Well, it was tough on the ego, but it was tremendously helpful in the learning process. So I did that pretty much full time for about a year and a half and decided, this is good, but it's hard work. You don't make any money, and I need to do something else. So I went back to school, got a master's degree, again at the University of Maryland in industrial technology, which nobody knows what that means, but it was involved. I chose aviation as my focus and got hired by Cessna Aircraft Company.
Really?
And this was during the late 70s. Cessna, all the manufacturers were doing great guns, and I went from flying old airplanes to brand new ones all over the country and in the corporate flight environment, so I got quite an education there.
Did you fly the 400 series Cessnas as well as the 100?
I was largely doing training airplanes, so I did pretty much all the singles and the Cessna 310, which is one of my favorite airplanes. And
we have one. I think it's one of the best airplanes out there.
I became a demo pilot for them and learned a lot of things about multi-engine airplanes that you want to be particularly careful with. Hold that thought. We'll come back to it. Well, Flight Safety International, which is the big simulator-based training organization, was starting up a new program at Cessna. They built a new learning center in Wichita, and they said, we need a new product marketing manager. And so I said, well, that sounds interesting. Maybe I'll give that a shot. Well, I was lucky because the bottom fell out of the general aviation manufacturing business a year after I left.
Yep.
But Flight Safety was doing things. We were training on the 400 series and the two turboprops that they'd just come out with, the Conquest 1 and the Conquest 2, in simulators. And my job was to help doctors, lawyers, and Indian chiefs how to fly these things. And the polite way of putting it is being financially gifted but aeronautically challenged. And you probably deal with some of that as well.
I say that some people have more money than aviation sense.
Well, and so the challenge is to try to get them up to a place where they won't hurt themselves, and then let's put a little higher gloss on them. Sometimes it works, and occasionally there are a few people that really shouldn't be flying, and then we have to engage in a little tough love and tell them not.
That's right.
So was doing that, did that for 11 years, was having a great time with it. And Phil Boyer, who's the prior president of AOPA, was one of my clients, and I'd helped him with a couple of projects. And he said, we need to hire a new executive director for our Air Safety Foundation, and you'd be good at that. And I said, well, I don't know anything about running a nonprofit. And he said, run it like a business. The only difference is that you're funding the endowment rather than making money and so on. And by the way, you have to kill what you eat. Okay, well, so tasked with raising money and producing training content and so forth. And the timing was really good because this was a time where we started to go from videotapes into online training. We had the first online course available for runway safety in conjunction with the FAA back in the mid-90s, I guess, and so on. I stayed with AOPA and ran their foundation, or it ran me, I should say, backed by a tremendous team of people for 22 years. And at that point figured, I should probably retire. It would be good for the organization, and I want to do some other things as well. So I retired and moved with my South Carolina bride down to the Charleston area, and had to buy an airplane because I've been fortunate to fly other people's airplanes all my life. And we still had family up in the D.C. area, and I said, well, it's 9.5 hours on I-95 surrounded by hundreds of idiots, or it's about 3 hours via Bonanza surrounded by the idiot you married.
Right.
She said, we'll do that, because I took her flying on our first date when we were in college. So
she knew the deal.
She knew the deal, and she was right there. So I started writing this book. One of my friends said, you'd be good at that, and you should learn that. And I don't know. Well, I thought about it. I had nothing else to do. So I started writing this book, capturing all of this information and experience over the years. And one of my friends again in Washington said, there's an opening on the National Transportation Safety Board, and you'd be good at that. And I said, well, I'm the least political person I know. And they said, that's why you should, get this job.
Yep.
Exactly. So somehow, by hook or by crook, I managed to get through all of the wickets and got appointed as the vice chairman. And it's a 5-year term, and I went a little longer than 5 years. They asked me if I'd re-up, and I said no. I've got other things to do and more people to annoy elsewhere. And so I gave them an extra year. And when you're on the board, you're not allowed to publish. Our ethics rules are very, very strict. So I wanted to finish this project and come back to this environment here. And so I retired from the board in 2023, finished the book, and I'm doing a little bit of writing and a little bit of consulting work and things of that nature, a little legal service kinds of things, and just having a great time and flying the Bonanza and doing a little bit of instructing on the side.
Yeah.
So that's it.
I think it's such a cool career, because if you would have started back in 1978 and said, what's your career going to look like, you probably couldn't have forecast what that course was going to take.
Absolutely not. I like to say I was lucky in love, and I've been lucky in life. And this worked out far better than I had the right to expect. And a lot of it, I make the point, none of us achieved success on our own. We like to think, we did it. No, we had a tremendous amount of help.
Everybody's got a team.
I had wonderful mentors along the way who helped prepare me for the next level.
Talk to people about what it was like to work with AOPA, in their safety foundation. What's it like behind the scenes at AOPA?
Well, initially it was scary as all get out. I sort of wondered what I'd gotten myself into, and I had to raise money from high dollar individuals, and I was used to being around them because of my flight safety and Cessna experience to a certain extent. So, and I'd learned a lot about selling. So you had to explain your proposition, help them to understand why it would be to their benefit to participate in this. And most of these people were pretty sophisticated. They understood.
Right.
And the other thing was to be totally honest with them. Integrity is a word that I think we sometimes underuse these days. You have to tell people what the truth is, even if it doesn't necessarily serve your purpose.
That's exactly right.
So it was a target-rich environment. There was a lot of things that needed to be said, and at the time, the internet was just starting to get going and so on. So we were able to catch that wave and start to put out a tremendous amount of content. And I told the team there, very capable and dedicated individuals, I said, look, you might think we're in the training business. We're not. We're in the communications business. There's nothing new under the sun in terms of why we have crashes in airplanes. Same stuff, different day. Our job is to package it, make it interesting, and make it sticky so that when they are faced with a challenge or a situation, that
split second time where they got to make that choice,
which is what you do as an instructor.
That's right.
in teaching them about airplanes, and say, okay, I want you to watch what happens here, and then let's talk about how that came to be. Because
a pilot's the airplane is moving. It's a dynamic situation. You're constantly making decisions, but there are big decisions that need to be made. Sometimes it's turning away. Sometimes it's doing a go around.
Absolutely.
Sometimes there's things that and little nuggets that people have dropped into your
bag of tricks.
There you go. Yeah, there you go. That's the place, because somebody's got to make a decision on the fly right then, and making a good quality decision right then is everything.
So one of the things I learned, because I wrote up a lot of accidents in AOPA, I had a monthly column called Safety Pilot, and they still occasionally let me publish things. And on the board, of course, we would come along and try to dissect what happened. I get a great feeling of humility because we have hours, days, weeks, and months to analyze what somebody in a tough situation may have literally had only a few seconds or minutes to make a critical decision. And it's so easy to Monday morning quarterback. So at the board, our job is not to find fault or blame. It's to figure out what happened, why it happened, and then how it can be prevented. And you'll hear me talk about crash versus accident. In the board's terminology, they're two different things. What do you think an accident is?
Accident, I would say, would be something where the airframe is bent or somebody died.
Well, you would think that, but as far as the way the board looks at it, we would say an accident is something that's rare and unpredictable, whereas a crash, we pretty much have seen before. We know that it happens with great frequency. We know why it happened, pretty much, and we absolutely know how to prevent it. So VFR into IMC, those aren't accidents, those are crashes. Loss of directional control on a runway. Most of the time, unless there's a mechanical issue, that's a crash. We know that people aren't using their feet the way they should. They're not making the proper crosswind correction, whatever. As an instructor, you see all of these things and you can see it developing, and then you say, okay, let's not do it that way. Let's do it this way, and we'll do it. We'll repeat it so that the grooves get worn in enough times so that when you're up here on your own, you know exactly what to do, and we can scratch that one off of your potential crash repertoire.
That's a great way to say it. If you flying into a thunderstorm would be a crash, because we know flying into thunderstorms doesn't work.
That's not a life-prolonging activity, no.
It's not a life-prolonging. Yeah, a fuel valve that cracked and broke and dumped fuel overboard and caused a loss of fuel. That's an accident because you didn't see it coming. It wasn't a thing that a pilot created. They may or may not have overcome that, but that's going to be an accident.
So in that case, the responsibility more likely shifts either to the manufacturer, because sometimes these things happen, and sometimes it goes to maintenance. Once in a great while, well, maybe not as more frequently than we'd like to admit, the owner takes a shortcut and the mechanic says, you know, this thing really needs to be replaced. And the guy says, it's working fine, we'll get to it later. Well, there are some things on our airplanes that we really can't afford to have go bad. And so that needs to be addressed. There are other things, cosmetics and so on. Yeah, we can probably let that slide until we've got more time to deal with it or whatever it happens to be. So the responsibility shifts. In the book, we cover a little bit of that. So in the automation section, I'd like to talk about the Boeing 737 MAX and Airbus and some of the crashes along, and those were crashes because the first 737 MAX situation, that was something of an accident. It had aspects of crash in it because there were knowledgeable people who knew that a single point failure, which is what the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, or MCAS, you should not have a single point failure. So the first one, we'll call that an accident, at least as far as the pilots are concerned. The second one, however, about 2 weeks after the first aircraft crashed, Boeing and the FAA put out an emergency airworthiness directive that went worldwide to every MAX operator and said, here's what happens and here's how you deal with it. And Boeing invited the board members, there were only 3 of us at the time, which is a minimum we can have for a quorum, down to fly a simulator, a MAX simulator in Miami with the original software. And we had about a 20-minute briefing on how this would happen and what to expect, and then how to recover from it. Well, once you understood that, it was very easy to recover. So when the MCAS system goes haywire, and the thing starts to auto trim nose down. You blip the electric trim, that disables it for 9 seconds. But then it re-engages. Now that's not a good idea, but it re-engages because Boeing thought this was a good idea. I won't get into all of the details, but you bring the power back to 80%, pitch up 10 degrees, get the airplane slowed down, and then disengage the MCAS system and auto stabilization, and then you can hand fly the airplane and it's perfectly controllable. The first crew didn't know to do that, although the captain intuitively was hitting the electric trim and so on. The second crew never figured any of that out because they hadn't been told by their airline and the training department what to do. Sorry, but that's not how it should be. And unfortunately, the accident investigation board of the country that was involved whitewashed the whole thing because it's a government-owned operation and so on, and they didn't want to take responsibility. So there are a few stones that get turned over there, and it's kind of ugly underneath in some of the crashes. So we should talk a little bit about kind of how this is organized. And in the book, I try to take people through, first off, human factors. You know, why is it always us? Well, it's because generally the hardware is pretty good and air traffic control system's pretty good, but we have agency, if you will, over all of this. And so as instructors, our job is to help pilots make that transition into knowing what's the right thing to do, when to do it, and all of that. But our psychology is complicated and our motivations are complicated. We really want to get home. We've really got to, I don't like to use the term mission in flying in general aviation. Military has missions. In our job, it's a flight. It's not a mission. Life and death doesn't depend on this.
Correct.
Well, it does, but not because of that.
The mission does not life or death. Yeah.
Right. So we have motivations. We really want to get there. We don't want to disappoint our passengers. If we're flying under Part 135 or the airlines, there's external pressures that are kind of pushing us in this direction. But the laws of physics and gravity don't care about any of that.
Correct.
So we talk about psychology. The next area is in takeoff and landings, and I'll talk about that. You read the chapter first, and then you can go, and there's usually a bunch of case studies in there, airlines, corporate, light general aviation, and so forth. And you can jump around and take a look at that. Within the case studies, I have the NTSB putting forth what they thought happened and their probable cause. And then I have reserved for myself some commentary. And sometimes it agrees, occasionally it doesn't. And our legal system has the ability to kind of put their thumb on the scales and create some outsized effects that you wouldn't ordinarily think in terms of the physics and the gravitational aspects would be the normal outcome. So I take on the legal profession in places where they sue the manufacturer, and it was a perfectly functioning airplane that the pilot took into the ground, and lay juries sometimes don't understand all of the details of how that came to be. So I have a little fun with that.
You know, I think you organized the book really brilliantly. It's because it's not,
I didn't pay you to say that.
No.
I want to make that perfectly clear.
And let me just say, it's such an interesting book because it's not one where you're just going to start at the front and read all the way to the other side.
Don't do that.
Right. It's more of stories where you figure out I want to learn about human factors, and then go read a story inside there about that. It's almost where if you read that chapter or that story that's inside there, you pull the nugget out of that story, and then read the next one. It's well laid out. I really think it's cool.
Thank you. Again, I look at where I came from and all of the things that I've seen in the various jobs. I couldn't hold a job for a period of time, as you can see, but come away with each one had a different perspective. And so I like to say this is an eclectic view of aviation safety, a little different than what a lot of people traditionally look at. And yeah, I know what I know, I don't know what I don't know. And so this is hopefully a way to kind of open up and peel back the layers of the onion, whatever metaphor you want to use, to help them get a much broader picture of how this works. And then most importantly, what does it mean to me in my type of flying? How do I go about this? If I'm running an organization, how should I be structuring my organization to support my pilots or my manufacturing operation so that we avoid some of the obvious mistakes that have been made before? And I've actually come across a few people who didn't know who Icarus was. So that's explained, but I think it's a good metaphor for people to say, okay, we know if you do this, this will happen.
Right.
And that's been well written. And one of the questions I like to ask people is, are you smarter than your grandfather? And the answer, of course, is no. Are you smarter than the ancient Egyptians? And the answer is no, because human evolution takes thousands, tens of thousands of years. Those people were very smart, but they didn't have the tools that we do. In aviation, we learned as we went. Wilbur and Orville were brilliant. Chuck Yeager was brilliant and had, great ability, and the engineers that design things. But what happens is our knowledge base becomes so much better and more powerful, and then all we have to do is absorb that knowledge and say, okay, let's not do some of the things that we know don't work. VFR into IMC, taking on crosswinds that are more than what I or the aircraft can handle, et cetera, et cetera.
When you listen to Manny Cassiano's aircraft crash report, or he gives a report on the crashes that have happened in the last convention year. When you listen to that, what did you think? I mean, not of his report, not of his presentation.
No.
It was excellent.
The subject.
What of his subject, of what he's what came to your mind as a person that doesn't know the PA-46 world that well, but you know aviation extremely well? What were your thoughts going through your mind?
Joe, it's, as I mentioned earlier, same stuff, different day. We've seen all of this before. The PA-46 community has seen all of this before. So now the challenge for us is to figure out how to keep it from happening again to us.
Correct. We do a lot of crashing airplanes in the PA-46 world and hardly any accidents, meaning that we know it causes the accidents. It's going to be engine failures that are botched. It's going to be a stall spin accident due to autopilot mishandling or something of that nature. It's going to be a loss of control on the runway because you don't know what your feet are for, or misappropriate your feet, or have a tire blowout that you mishandle. It's the same song and dance all the time. We rarely have something that truly is
an accident.
An accident. That's for sure.
Joe, once again, you haven't given me the opportunity to argue with you.
Bruce, you've got a wonderful book. It's called Learning from Icarus. How do people get this book?
Very simply, just go on Amazon and put Learning from Icarus Landsberg, and it'll come up, and there's both hard copy and electronic copy for those who are so inclined. It's 431 pages and color pictures. Pilots like pictures. There's lots of pictures in there and over 40 case studies.
Bruce, it's been so nice to have you here at the PMOPA convention. You honor us with your presence here. We are all better for it, and I think you ought to go buy this book today. Thank you so much
Joe,
for being a part of it.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here.
It's been our pleasure.